September 3rd, 1669, the defenders of the city for the last time. They opened fire on the enemy. The next day they raised the white flag. It was the last day of the Siege of Candia, a siege that lasted 21 years, from 1648 to 1669. It was the longest siege in history. The Ottoman losses in this siege amounted to 240,000 people. The casualties of the besieged are unknown. The question arises, why did the armies and their commanders make such sacrifices, seizing the castle and not bypassing it? Until effective artillery was invented, castles were built in all countries and at all times. For defensive purposes, as a rule, they were erected on hills or open places near the river. Thus, a beautiful circular view of the surrounding area was achieved. In order to slow down the onslaught of the enemy, the approaches to the castle were strengthened in every possible way. The usual practice is deep ditches with water, several outer rings, and powerful main walls. For example, the main 65-meter tower of Kuzi Castle in Esna had walls up to 7 meters thick. The castles of the fortress, as I have said, were intended to protect against attack, so their arrangement. It eliminates even the slightest weaknesses and imperfections. Strongly locked doors were made as narrow as possible. The only bridge that reached the fortress was a lift. In short, it was completely isolated from the outside world. Through the loopholes of the towers, the defenders of the castle dropped on the heads of the attacking corps balloons and poured boiling tar. To capture the castle, it was necessary to isolate it, that is, to block all ways of supplying food. That is why the attacking armies were much larger than the defending armies. The food issue was the most painful. Without water, a person can live for several days. No food for about a month. This should be taken into account his low combat capability during the hunger strike. Therefore, the owners of the castle preparing for the siege often went to extreme measures. They threw out all the commoners who could not benefit the defense. The castle garrison was small. It was impossible to subdue an entire army under siege. For taking the castle from the sea, the best season was summer. Rain falls less than in spring or autumn. In winter, the inhabitants of the castle could get water by melting snow. The harvest is not yet ripe, and old stocks are running out. The attackers tried to deprive the castle of a source of water. For example, they built dams on the river. In the most extreme cases, biological weapons were used. Bodies were thrown into the water, which could provoke outbreaks of epidemics throughout the district. Those in the castle who were captured, the attackers mutilated and released. They came back and became involuntary freeloaders. In the castle they might not be accepted, but if they were the wives or children of the besieged, the voice of the heart outweighed them. No less cruel were the inhabitants of the surrounding villages who tried to deliver supplies to the castle. In 1161, during the siege of Milan, Friedrich Barbarossa ordered 25 Piacenzas to be cut off, who tried to supply the enemy with provisions. But what if Friedrich Barbarossa walked around the castle? Unfortunately, that would not have happened. First, the value of luck. In areas that were often raided by various armies, castles were often built. They served as a common center. In case of danger, all the goods were brought to the castle from the neighboring villages and stayed there themselves. Anything they couldn't take with them was burned. And in general, most of the castles behind their walls, in addition to the nobles, and even a huge number of supplies, valuable items, weapons, guns, and the like. And bypassing the castle means giving up all this. And against going around, there was a second reason. Danger of supply line closure. If you and your army decide to go further into the interior of a country that does not care about security for you, the castle may be a problem for you. In the Middle Ages, the number of roads between settlements was reduced to a minimum, and they ran through everything. Villages and castles, and your army and you are in need of supplies of food and food to be delivered. You have separate supply caravans on the same roads. In addition to the fact that skipping the lock you lengthen the supply line as delivering products. This is from your last controlled area. More importantly, you are risking what you have. The supply of the army may be terminated by the forces of the garrison which remained in the castle, which you have bypassed. Unprotected wagons with useful and vital goods for you will be in the sight of the defenders. And they're obviously going to be attacked. And your food will be the prey of your enemy. And third, you decided to start a war, or you were declared a war. But even if you went on the offensive, took a few locks, and then things didn't go the way you did, if you want to, you will be able to stay on the fence. The castles of your enemy, which have already submitted to you, will now become your defense. And your enemy can't get past the first two reasons. That was during the 100 Years' War. The strategic initiative changed hands and only previously captured or held in time. The locks did not allow the parties to finally suffer defeat. By the way, this tactic took place in the Second World War. The cities, which now replaced the fortress walls with high-rise buildings, controlled important junctions of iron and steel. Roads and did not allow themselves to simply ignore and bypass. Subscribe to the channel. I regularly conduct surveys for future videos. Write a comment. Bye.